The morning Thea Rivers turned 18, nobody threw her a party. No cake, no candles, no cards tucked into envelopes with her name written in careful script. Just the sound of rain against the window of the group home, steady and indifferent, like the world itself had decided this particular milestone wasn't worth celebrating. She sat on the edge of her bed, the one she'd slept in for the past 4 years, and watched the second hand tick forward on the cheap wall clock. Each movement precise, mechanical, final. At exactly 9 o'clock, Ms. Bradford knocked. 3 times, always 3. Never more, never less. The woman had a system for everything, a careful order to the way she moved through the world. Thea had learned early on that people who worked in the system loved their systems. It gave them something to hold on to when everything else fell apart. "Come in." The door opened. Ms. Bradford stepped inside, and Thea knew immediately that this was the last time she'd see this room. There was something in the way the caseworker held herself. Not unkind, but distant. Professional. The way you'd stand if you were delivering mail to a stranger. "Happy birthday, Thea." "Thank you." Ms. Bradford set a cardboard box on the bed. Standard issue. The kind they used for donations at church sales. Thea's name was written across the side in black marker. Someone's handwriting, not Ms. Bradford's. Probably whoever had packed it. Some volunteer who'd never met her, and never would. "Everything's in order," Ms. Bradford said. She held out a clipboard. "Just need your signature here, and here." Thea signed. The pen felt heavy in her hand. "There's one more thing." Ms. Bradford reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope. Legal size, official looking, the kind that carried weight even before you opened it. "This arrived last week from an attorney's office in Seattle." Thea took it. Her name was typed across the front. Thea Elizabeth Rivers. Nobody ever used her middle name. It felt strange seeing it there, formal and complete, like she was someone important enough to require all 3. "What is it? An inheritance?" Miss Bradford's expression didn't change. "Apparently you owned property in Washington State, left to you by your grandfather." The words hung in the air between them. Grandfather. Thea turned the envelope over in her hands. The seal was still intact, red wax, old-fashioned. She ran her thumb across it and felt the raised impression of initials she didn't recognize. "I didn't know I had a grandfather. The file says he passed away 12 years ago. Marcus Rivers. He was your father's father." 12 years. Thea would have been 6. She searched her memory for something, anything. A face, a voice, a moment. But there was nothing there except empty space where family was supposed to be. Did he ever? She didn't finish the question. Didn't need to. Ms. Bradford knew what she was asking. No. The word was gentle, as gentle as Ms. Bradford ever got. "There's no record of contact. I'm sorry." Thea nodded. She'd learned a long time ago that sorry didn't change anything. It was just something people said when they didn't know what else to offer. Ms. Bradford checked her watch. A practiced gesture. Time to move on. Time to close this file and open the next one. "You have my number if you need anything. First 30 days can be rough. Don't hesitate to reach out. They shook hands. Miss Bradford's grip was firm and brief. Then she was gone, her footsteps fading down the hallway, already moving toward the next kid, the next signature, the next goodbye. Thea sat alone in the empty room. She looked at the cardboard box. Everything she owned in the world. A few worn shirts, a pair of jeans, sneakers with holes in the soles, a watch that didn't tick anymore, but she kept anyway because it was the only thing she had from before. Before the system. Before the shuffle between houses and families and people who meant well but never stayed. And now this. An envelope. An inheritance. A grandfather she'd never known. She broke the seal. Inside were documents, legal papers with dense paragraphs and official stamps. She skimmed through them trying to make sense of the language. Terms like deed and property rights and survey boundaries. Then she found the summary page. 200 acres. Forest land. Washington State. Cascade Mountain region. And a structure described as a former lumber mill. Condition unknown. Thea stared at the words until they stopped making sense. She owned land. She owned a building. She owned something. For 18 years, she'd owned nothing. Not the bed she slept in. Not the clothes in her drawer. Not even the toothbrush in the bathroom. Everything had been borrowed. Temporary. Conditional. And now she had 200 acres of forest in a place she'd never been. She kept reading. Attached to the deed was a handwritten note. The paper was old, yellowed at the edges. The ink had faded, but the words were still clear. Written in tight, careful script. Don't trust what they say about the land. No signature. No explanation. Just those 8 words. Thea turned the envelope upside down and shook it. 2 more items fell onto the bed. The first was a map, hand-drawn. Crude but detailed. It showed the outline of the property, the location of the mill, a winding river, and thick forest marked with small symbols she didn't recognize. In the corner, someone had written coordinates. The second was a piece of stone. Cloudy quartz about the size of her thumb. The surface was rough and unpolished, and when she held it up to the light, she could see fractures running through it like veins. Thea sat there for a long time, turning the quartz over in her hands. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. Seattle area code. She almost didn't answer, but something made her swipe to accept. Hello. Ms. Rivers. The voice was male, professional, the kind of smooth that came from years of practice. This is David Kellerman. I'm calling from Titan Energy Corporation. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. Who? Titan Energy. We're a resource development company based here in the Pacific Northwest. I'm reaching out regarding a property you recently inherited, near Cascade Falls. Thea's grip tightened on the phone. How did you know about that? It's public record once the deed transfers. We keep an eye on properties in regions where we operate. A pause. Then, carefully, we'd like to discuss a potential acquisition, if you're interested. I just found out about it an hour ago. I understand. And I'm not trying to rush you, but I wanted to make sure you knew you had options. Inheriting land can be complicated, especially when you're just starting out on your own. Another pause, calculated. We'd be willing to make this very simple for you, Ms. Rivers. Very straightforward. Something in his tone made her skin prickle. I haven't even seen it yet. Of course. Completely understandable. Why don't I send over some information? No pressure. Just so you have a sense of what we're offering. We can talk more when you're ready. I didn't say I was selling. No, you didn't. His voice remained pleasant, unruffled. But you also didn't say you weren't. Sometimes the best decision is the practical one, especially for someone in your situation. Someone in your situation. The words landed like a slap. He knew. Of course he knew. Public record. That's what he'd said. He'd looked her up. Knew she'd just aged out. Knew she had no money, no support, no one to call for advice. Knew she was alone. I have to go, she said. Of course. I'll send that information over. And Ms. Rivers. He waited. We really do hope to hear from you soon. The line went dead. Thea sat there staring at her phone. Then she opened her recent calls. 6 missed calls, all from the same Seattle number, all in the past week. Before she'd even opened the envelope, before she'd even known. They'd been calling, waiting, watching. She looked down at the handwritten note again. Don't trust what they say about the land. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was still gray, but there was a break in the clouds, a thin strip of pale light cutting through. Thea made a decision. She wasn't gonna sell. Not yet. Not until she understood what this was, what they wanted, what her grandfather had been trying to tell her. She packed the cardboard box, added the envelope and its contents. Then she pulled out her phone and searched for bus routes heading north. The Greyhound left at midnight. The bus station smelled like coffee and diesel fuel, and bodies pressed too close together. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. Thea sat in a plastic chair near the back wall, her cardboard box at her feet, and watched people come and go. A mother with 2 small children, an old man with a duffel bag, a woman in a business suit who kept checking her watch like she couldn't believe she'd ended up here. Everyone traveling, everyone leaving something behind. The bus to Seattle arrived 15 minutes late. The driver barely looked at her as she climbed aboard. She found a seat near the middle next to the window and pressed her forehead against the cold glass. The city lights blurred past. Then suburbs. Then darkness. She must have fallen asleep because when she opened her eyes, the landscape had changed. Trees now. Thick and tall and endless. The kind of forest that looked like it had been there long before roads cut through it. Rain streaked across the window in horizontal lines. The bus rocked gently as it climbed higher into the mountains. Thea pulled out the map and studied it under the dim reading light. The property was marked clearly. About 50 miles north of Seattle, deep in timber country. The mill sat near a bend in a river surrounded by dense forest on all sides. She traced the route with her finger. There was a town nearby. Small. Maybe 1,000 people. A place called Cascade Falls. The bus would get her to the main road. After that, she'd have to figure it out. She folded the map and tucked it back into her jacket. Then she pulled out the quartz stone and held it in her palm. It was cool to the touch, smooth in places where it had been handled, rough where it hadn't. She wondered if her grandfather had held this same stone, if he'd turned it over in his hands the way she was doing now, if he'd looked at it and seen something she couldn't. Pretty stone. Thea looked up. An elderly woman sat across the aisle 2 rows ahead. She'd turned in her seat and was smiling. The kind of smile that seemed genuine. Tired but warm. "Thank you. Where are you headed?" "Cascade Falls." The woman's smile faded slightly. "You got family up there?" "I'm not sure." It was an honest answer. The woman seemed to understand. "Be careful," she said. "That area has been through some hard times. Lots of folks struggling. Lots of folks desperate." She paused. "Not everyone's friendly to strangers." "I'll be careful." The woman nodded, then turned back around in her seat. Thea looked out the window again. The trees were thicker now, darker. The kind of darkness that felt old, permanent. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep. But all she could think about was the phone call, the voice on the other end, the certainty in his tone. They'd been waiting for her. The bus dropped her at the edge of town just after dawn. Cascade Falls looked exactly like a place that had run out of time. Main Street was lined with buildings that had once been something. A hardware store with boarded windows. A diner with a faded sign. A gas station with 2 pumps and a price board that hadn't been updated in months. Everything had that worn, defeated look. Like the town had tried to hold on and finally given up. Thea stood on the sidewalk with her cardboard box and the map and watched a pickup truck drive past. The driver glanced at her but didn't slow down, didn't wave, just kept going. She checked the map. The mill was about a mile east off the main road. There was a logging trail that led in, probably overgrown by now. She started walking. The rain had softened to a drizzle. The kind that wasn't heavy enough to soak you, but persistent enough that you'd be wet within minutes. Thea pulled her hood up and kept her head down. The road turned to gravel, then dirt. The trees grew closer, their branches reaching overhead to form a canopy that blocked out most of the light. The air smelled like pine and wet earth and something else. Something metallic, like old machinery left to rust. She found the trail, or what was left of it. Moss had claimed most of the path, turning it into a soft green corridor. Ferns grew thick on either side. The only sound was the rain and her footsteps, and the occasional bird call from somewhere deep in the trees. Then she saw the mill. It rose out of the forest like something that had been abandoned mid-sentence. The structure leaned to one side, the wooden frame warped and split from years of weather. Windows were shattered, leaving dark holes that stared out like empty eyes. The roof sagged in the middle and she could see daylight through gaps in the boards. Behind it, barely visible through the trees, was a river. Slow and brown and choked with debris. Thea approached slowly. The front entrance was a wide loading bay, the kind designed for trucks to back up and haul timber. The door hung crooked on its hinges. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The smell hit her first. Damp wood, rot, the sharp tang of mold. The floor was littered with broken glass and rusted tools and pieces of machinery she couldn't identify Rain dripped through holes in the roof, creating puddles that reflected what little light made it through. But it was the silence that struck her most. The kind of silence that felt heavy, deliberate, like the building itself was holding its breath. She set the cardboard box down near the entrance and walked deeper inside. The main floor was massive. High ceilings supported by thick beams. Rows of workbenches lined one wall, their surfaces scarred and stained. She could see where saws had been mounted, where conveyor belts had run. All of it stripped away or left to rust. This had been a working mill once, a place where men showed up before dawn and left after dark, where timber was cut and processed and shipped out to build houses and bridges and towns. Now it was just bones. Thea walked to the far wall and ran her hand along the wood. Her fingers came away dark with soot. She looked closer. The wood was charred, not from age, from fire. Someone had burned this section deliberately. The pattern was too clean, too controlled. She stepped back and studied the marks. They ran along the entire western wall, concentrated near what looked like it had once been an office. The door was gone. Inside, the floor was blackened. What had happened here? She turned slowly, taking in the space, trying to imagine it as it had been, full of noise and movement and purpose. Then she heard it, faint, almost imperceptible. Tick, tick, crack. She froze. The sound was coming from below, from beneath the floor. Thea knelt down and pressed her ear to the wood. The sound was clearer now, rhythmic, like something settling or shifting. She stood and walked across the floor, testing each board with her weight. Most were solid despite their age. But near the center of the room, she found a section that felt different, hollow. She knelt again and examined the planks. They were newer than the rest, not by much, but enough that she could see the difference. The wood was darker, less weathered, like someone had replaced them recently. Thea looked around for something to use. She found a rusted hammer near one of the workbenches, heavy, solid. She lifted it and brought it down on the planks, once, twice. On the third strike, the wood splintered. She pulled back the broken pieces and looked down into the gap she'd created. Darkness stared back, but not just darkness. Metal, thick and industrial. A hatch, sealed tight with a heavy brass lock. Her heart pounded in her chest. She reached into her jacket and pulled out the envelope, shook it again. And this time something fell out that she'd missed before. A key. Small. Brass. Old. She held it up to the light filtering through the roof. Then she looked down at the lock. It would fit. She knew it would fit. For a long moment, Thea didn't move. This was the point of decision. The moment where she could still walk away, leave this place, sell the land, take the money and disappear into a life that made sense. But she thought about the phone calls, the voice on the other end, the certainty that she'd give up. And she thought about her grandfather, a man she'd never met, who'd left her this place and this warning and this key. Don't trust what they say about the land. Thea knelt beside the hatch, slid the key into the lock, and turned. The mechanism clicked. Heavy. Final. She lifted the hatch. Cold air rushed up from below, sharp and mineral and ancient, like opening a tomb that had been sealed for years. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness and found stone stairs, narrow, spiraling down into nothing. She stood at the edge and looked down. The stairs disappeared into blackness, no bottom visible, no sound except that same rhythmic tick-tick crack, echoing up from somewhere deep below. Thea took a breath. Then she started down. The stairs were carved from stone. Old stone. Not the kind you found in modern construction. These were hand-cut irregular, each step slightly different from the last. The walls pressed close on either side, and the air grew colder with every step. Her flashlight flickered. She stopped, tapped it against her palm. The beam steadied. Down and down. The stairs spiraled in a tight circle, and she lost count after 50 steps. Maybe 100. Maybe more. Then the stairs ended. Thea stepped out onto level ground and swept her flashlight across the space. And stopped breathing. The cavern stretched out before her like something from another world. Massive. The ceiling lost in shadow high above. And everywhere, rising from the stone floor like a frozen forest, were pillars of crystal. Not small formations, not clusters. Trees, or what had once been trees, now transformed into towering columns of quartz, some as thick as her body, others thinner, branching out like limbs reaching toward an invisible sky. Their surfaces caught the flashlight beam and threw it back in fractured patterns, creating constellations of light that moved across the walls. It was beautiful and impossible. Thea walked forward slowly, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. She reached out and touched one of the crystal trunks. It was cool under her fingers, smooth in places, rough in others. She could see into it, see the layers and inclusions and imperfections that made it real. This wasn't glass. This wasn't carved or manufactured. This was stone that had once been wood. She moved deeper into the cavern, her light sweeping across formation after formation. Some stood alone. Others grew in clusters, their branches intertwining overhead. Then she noticed the details that didn't belong. Near the base of one massive column, there was equipment. A portable drill rig, old, rusted, collapsed on its side like it had been abandoned mid-use. Cables snaked across the floor leading from the rig to nothing, their ends frayed and corroded. She followed the cables and found more equipment. A generator, dead. A workbench with tools scattered across it. A hard hat lying on its side. Someone had been working down here. Not recently, but not so long ago that everything had completely deteriorated. Thea knelt beside the drill rig and examined it. The bit was still attached. She could see where it had been used. The metal was scored and worn. They'd been drilling, taking samples. She stood and continued exploring. The cavern seemed to go on forever, branching off into smaller chambers and tunnels. But she stayed in the main space, following the path the cables had laid out. Then she felt it. A vibration. Subtle, coming up through the soles of her shoes. She stopped and stood perfectly still. The vibration came again, rhythmic, like a pulse deep beneath the stone, the sound she'd heard from above. Tick, tick, crack. It was coming from below, from somewhere even deeper than this cavern. The temperature had been dropping steadily since she'd entered, but now she noticed it was warmer, not cold anymore, almost humid, geothermal. The word came to her from a science class years ago, heat from deep in the earth. She swept her flashlight across the far wall, and that's when she saw him. A figure, sitting against the stone, body slumped, head tilted forward. Thea's breath caught. She approached slowly, each step deliberate, her light steady on the shape ahead. As she got closer, the details became clear. An old man, or what was left of one. The body was dried, mummified by the cool, dry air of the cavern. He wore work clothes, canvas jacket, boots. One arm was curled protectively around a metal case. Thea stopped 3 feet away. She knew who this was. Knew it with a certainty that went deeper than logic. Marcus Rivers, her grandfather. For a long moment she couldn't move, couldn't think. 12 years of emptiness. 12 years of believing she'd been abandoned. That no one had cared enough to come back for her. And here he was. He hadn't left. He'd stayed. He died here. Alone. Protecting whatever this place was. Thea's vision blurred. She blinked hard, and the tears came anyway. Hot and sudden and years overdue. "You stayed," she whispered. Her voice echoed in the cavern. Came back to her from a dozen directions. "You stayed. You stayed. You stayed." She wiped her eyes and knelt beside him. The metal case was unlocked. She gently moved his arm and lifted the case free. Inside were papers, folders sealed with tape, and a notebook, worn, water-stained in places. The cover was plain brown leather with initials embossed in faded gold. M.R. Thea opened it with trembling hands. The first page was dated 12 years ago, almost to the day. The handwriting was tight and precise. Engineer's handwriting, each letter formed with care. She began to read. The notebook was a record, a journal, a confession. Marcus Rivers had been a field engineer for Titan Energy Corporation, one of their best. He'd spent 30 years reading the land-identifying resources, mapping potential extraction sites. In 2012, he'd been assigned to survey this region. Standard work, looking for timber value, checking soil composition, mapping the terrain. But he'd found something else. His equipment had picked up anomalies, energy signatures that didn't make sense, structural irregularities deep underground. He'd requested permission to investigate further. Titan had approved. They'd sent him back with better equipment, ground-penetrating radar, seismic sensors, core sample drills. And he'd found the cavern. The entries became more detailed, technical. He described the crystal formations, the mineral composition, the way they conducted energy in patterns he'd never seen before. Then he'd made the discovery that changed everything. The crystals weren't just mineral formations. They were part of a larger system, a natural geothermal reservoir trapped beneath layers of rock, and the crystals acted as conductors, storing energy, amplifying it, creating a potential power source unlike anything he'd encountered. Thea turned the page. The handwriting grew shakier. Marcus had calculated the energy potential. If someone figured out how to tap into it safely, it could power entire regions. Clean, sustainable, revolutionary. But the word that appeared again and again in his notes was unstable. The crystalline matrix sat on top of fault lines. The geothermal pressure was massive. Drilling too deep, disturbing the wrong section, could trigger a cascade effect. The crystals would fracture. The pressure would release. The entire system would collapse. And the collapse wouldn't stop at the cavern. Marcus had modeled it, run the numbers a dozen different ways. Every scenario ended the same. Catastrophic structural failure, seismic activity, potential earthquake measuring above 6 on the Richter scale, affecting a radius of 50 miles or more. He'd written in capital letters, "Extraction is not possible without risk of total collapse." Thea kept reading. Marcus had presented his findings to Titan, had shown them the data, the models, the risks. They'd thanked him for his work. Then they'd asked him to keep it quiet while they brought in their own team to verify. But Marcus had known what that meant. He'd worked for corporations long enough to understand. They weren't going to verify. They were going to find a way to make it work, to justify the risk, to extract the resource regardless of the danger, because the potential profit was too massive to walk away from. So, Marcus had done something desperate. He'd sabotaged the access, destroyed his own survey data, sealed the cavern entrance and covered it with the mill floor. And he'd resigned from Titan, but he'd known they wouldn't give up. Knew they'd come back eventually. So he'd stayed. Lived in the mill, monitored the site, kept watch. The entries grew more sporadic, dated months apart. Then came the entry that made Thea's blood run cold. November 2013. They came back. Middle of the night. A team from Titan. They had the old survey coordinates, brought their own equipment, started drilling without permits, without safety protocols, just trying to get samples as fast as possible. I couldn't stop them legally, so I stopped them physically. Cut their power lines, damaged their drill. They left, but not before they hit something. The drill went too deep, fractured one of the main crystal veins. The pressure released. Not all of it, just enough. The ground shook. 4.2 magnitude, felt for miles. 3 of their workers were injured. 1 disappeared, never found. Titan covered it up, blamed natural seismic activity, paid off the families, destroyed the evidence. I destroyed what was left of their drill site. Made sure they couldn't come back easily. But I know they will. Eventually. The entries stopped for several months after that. When they resumed, the tone had changed. Less technical, more human. I was supposed to pick her up that day. November 19th, 2014. Thea's 6th birthday. I'd promised her mother I'd be there. Promised Thea I'd take her to the zoo. But Titan's team came back, tried to access the cavern again. I had to stop them, had to choose. I chose this place over my granddaughter. I told myself it was for the greater good, that protecting this was more important than one birthday, one promise. But she was 6 years old, and I never came back. I've tried to make contact through the system, but they won't let me see her. My history with Titan, the accusations, they think I'm unstable, dangerous. Maybe they're right. I'm leaving everything to her. The land, the mill, this notebook. Maybe she'll understand. Maybe she'll forgive me. Or maybe she'll just sell it and move on. And I wouldn't blame her. But if she finds this, if she reads this, I need her to know. I didn't abandon her because I didn't love her. I abandoned her because I loved something I thought was bigger. I was wrong. The final entry was dated 2 weeks later. December 2014. They're coming. I can hear the machinery outside. Titan's back. With permits this time. Legal authority. I've sealed myself in. Destroyed the stairs behind me. They won't get down here easily. But I won't get out either. I'm sorry, Thea, for everything. Finish what I couldn't. Protect this place. Or don't. Just know that I thought about you every single day. The notebook ended there. Thea sat in the darkness holding the journal and let herself cry. Really cry. For the first time since she could remember. Not quiet tears, not controlled. Just raw, aching grief for a man she'd never known. For a childhood she'd never had. For all the years she'd spent believing no one had wanted her. He'd wanted her. He'd thought about her. He'd died regretting the choice he'd made. The sobs echoed through the cavern, bouncing off crystal and stone, until it sounded like the whole earth was grieving with her. Eventually, the tears stopped. She wiped her face with her sleeve and looked at her grandfather's body one more time. "I understand now," she whispered. She stood slowly. Her legs were stiff from kneeling. The metal case sat beside her. She opened it fully and found the folders Marcus had mentioned. Survey data, geological reports, seismic models. Everything he'd compiled. Everything Titan would need to attempt extraction again. And at the bottom, a sealed envelope, her name written on the front. She opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A will, handwritten, dated the day before he died. It left everything to her. The land, the mill, the rights to anything found on the property. But there was a clause, written in those same careful letters. To Thea Elizabeth Rivers, I leave you this burden and this choice. What you do with it is yours alone. But know this, some things are worth protecting even when the cost is everything. Thea folded the paper and put it back in the envelope. Then she gathered the notebook, the folders, and the case. She took one last look at Marcus. At the grandfather who'd sacrificed everything for a principle. Who died alone in the dark, protecting something he believed mattered more than his own life. I'll finish it, she said. Whatever it takes. The words felt like a promise, like an oath. She turned and began the long climb back to the surface, back to the mill. back to the world above where Titan energy was waiting, where they'd been waiting all along. As she climbed the stone stairs, that rhythmic pulse came again. Tick, tick, crack. The earth beneath her feet restless and patient, waiting to see what choice she'd make. Thea barely remembered the climb back up. Her hands were numb by the time she reached the top. The metal case felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Her legs trembled with each step, but she kept moving, driven by something beyond exhaustion, beyond grief, purpose. When she finally emerged through the hatch, the light hit her like a physical blow. Late afternoon sun filtering through the broken roof. She'd been underground for hours, long enough that the world above had moved on without her. She pulled herself onto the mill floor and lay there for a moment, breathing hard. The wood was rough against her back, cool and solid and real. Then she heard the engines. Thea sat up. Through the gaps in the walls, she could see them. 2 black SUVs rolling slowly up the overgrown trail. Expensive vehicles, out of place in the wilderness. They moved with the confidence of people who belonged everywhere. She stood, grabbed the metal case, and moved to the entrance. The SUVs stopped in the clearing outside, engines idling. Rain had started again, turning the ground to mud. For a long moment, nothing happened. Just the sound of engines and rain and her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Then the doors opened. Men stepped out. 4 of them. Dark jackets. Professional. Not threatening exactly, but present in a way that made their authority clear. They spread out, scanning the area with practiced efficiency. The driver's door of the lead vehicle opened last. The man who emerged was older than the others. 60s maybe. He wore a suit that probably cost more than everything Thea had ever owned combined. But he wore it like work clothes. Comfortable. Functional. He adjusted his jacket against the rain and looked directly at the mill. Directly at her. Then he started walking. Thea stepped out onto the sagging porch. The wood groaned under her weight. She set the metal case down beside her and waited. The man approached slowly, not cautious, just deliberate, like he had all the time in the world and knew she wasn't going anywhere. He stopped at the base of the steps. Rain dripped from his hair, but he didn't seem to notice. Thea Rivers. It wasn't a question. He already knew who she was. You made it here faster than I expected. His voice was calm, measured. The kind of voice that commanded boardrooms and negotiations. But there was something else underneath. Something that sounded almost like respect. Thea didn't respond. He smiled slightly. My name is Maxwell Cross. I'm the CEO of Titan Energy Corporation. I believe one of my associates called you yesterday. He did. And you came anyway. Maxwell looked past her at the mill, at the broken windows and sagging roof. Most people would have taken the offer without making the trip, especially someone in your situation. There it was again, that phrase, your situation. You've been watching me, Thea said. We've been watching the property. You just happen to be part of it now. He paused. May I ask what brought you all the way out here, curiosity, sentiment? Thea glanced down at the metal case. Maxwell followed her gaze. His expression shifted, just slightly. like a card player seeing an unexpected hand. You went below. It wasn't a question this time either. The rain filled the silence between them. Thea could feel the weight of his attention, the calculations happening behind his eyes. "Walk with me," Maxwell said finally. He gestured toward the dock behind the mill. "Please, I'd like to show you something." Thea hesitated. "I'm not gonna hurt you," Maxwell added. His tone was almost gentle. "And you're not gonna hurt me. We're both just here to have a conversation. Adult to adult." Something in the way he said it made her pause. Not threatening, not dismissive, just steady. She stepped down from the porch. They walked side by side through the wet grass. The dock stretched out over the slow brown river, its boards warped and split from years of weather. Maxwell tested the first plank with his weight, then continued forward. Thea followed. The river moved beneath them, sluggish, choked with debris and fallen branches, the kind of water that had given up trying to go anywhere. Maxwell stopped at the end of the dock and looked out over the forest. "Do you know what's happening to this region?" he asked. Thea said nothing. 20 years ago, this was timber country. Mills running 3 shifts. Trucks on the roads, men with jobs that could support families, build lives. He gestured toward the town. Cascade Falls had 3,000 people. A school, a hospital, a future. He turned to face her. Now it has barely 1,000. The school closed 5 years ago. The hospital's down to a single doctor who comes twice a week. Half the buildings on Main Street are empty. The people who stayed, he trailed off. They're not staying because they want to. They're staying because they can't afford to leave. "That's not my fault," Thea said. "No, it's not. It's economics, market forces, progress moving somewhere else." Maxwell's expression was unreadable. "But what's under your land could change that, could bring real jobs back. Infrastructure, investment, a reason for people to stay, to build again. By destroying it, by using it." He held her gaze. "There's a difference. My grandfather didn't think so." For the first time, Maxwell's composure cracked. Just for a second. Something flickered across his face. Grief, maybe. Or regret. "Marcus Rivers." He said the name quietly. "Did you find him down there?" Thea didn't answer. Maxwell looked away, stared out at the water. "Marcus was my teacher," he said. 25 years ago. I was fresh out of school. Didn't know a thing about field work. He took me under his wing, taught me how to read the land, how to see what wasn't obvious, how to respect what you were working with." He paused. "He was brilliant and stubborn as hell. The best engineer I ever knew." Thea felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't the conversation she'd expected. "Then why did you fight him?" Maxwell turned back to her. "Because he taught me something else, whether he meant to or not." He stepped closer, not aggressive, just present. "He taught me that doing nothing is still a choice, and it still has consequences. He was trying to protect this place, and in doing so, he froze it in time, Sealed away something that could help thousands of people. For what? To preserve rock formations no one will ever see. They're not just formations, they're unstable. If you drill wrong, the whole system collapses. We know the risks. No. Thea's voice was harder now. You think you do, but you don't understand what happens if you're wrong. Maxwell studied her. You read his notes. Every word. Then you know what's possible. The energy potential. What it could mean for this entire region. For the country. He gestured around them. Look at this place, Thea. Really look at it. The mill is dead. The town is dying. The people are suffering. And you're standing on top of something that could save them. All of them. The words landed heavy. Because they weren't wrong. Not entirely. Thea had seen the town. The empty buildings. The people with nowhere to go. What about the people who get hurt when it collapses? She asked. What about the earthquake? The 3 workers who were injured. The one who disappeared. Maxwell's jaw tightened. What are you talking about? 2013. Your team came here illegally. Drilled without permits. Caused a 4.2 magnitude earthquake. Titan covered it up. Paid people off. Destroyed the evidence. The color drained from Maxwell's face. That's not... He stopped. Drew a breath. Where did you hear that? Marcus documented everything. The drill site. The quake. The cover-up. Everything. For a long moment, Maxwell didn't speak. Rain fell around them. The river moved slow and indifferent below. When he finally responded, his voice was different, quieter, stripped of its corporate polish. I wasn't CEO in 2013. I was VP of Field Operations. They kept that incident classified. Executive level only. He looked at her. I heard rumors, whispers about an accident, but no one would confirm it. No one would show me the reports. You expect me to believe you didn't know. I expect you to understand that corporations have layers, and sometimes those layers hide things from each other. His expression hardened. If what you're saying is true, if Marcus documented it, then people lied to me. People I trusted. Thea watched him carefully, trying to read the truth behind his words. Even if you didn't know, she said, it happened. And it proves my grandfather was right. This place is too dangerous to touch. Maxwell shook his head slowly. No, it proves we approached it wrong, recklessly, without proper protocols. That doesn't mean it can't be done safely. You're willing to risk another earthquake, more injuries, possible deaths, just to extract energy. I'm willing to believe that with the right approach, the right science, we can do this without those risks. And yes, I think the potential reward is worth careful, measured effort. He stepped closer again. Listen to me, Thea. Really listen. This isn't about taking something from you. It's not about corporate greed or profit margins. It's about giving people hope. Real, tangible hope that things can get better. That their town doesn't have to die. That their children don't have to leave. He gestured vaguely toward the unseen town beyond the trees. You're 18 years old. You've been on your own for what, a day? And now you're supposed to make a decision that affects thousands of people. People who've been struggling for years while something that could help them sits untouched, underground, protected by a dead man's fear. The words hit like a slap. That's not fair. No, it's not. None of this is fair. Not for you. Not for them. Not for Marcus, who died alone trying to protect a secret. Maxwell's voice softened. But fair doesn't matter. What matters is what you do next. Thea felt the weight of it settling on her shoulders. The impossible choice. The competing responsibilities. What do you want from me? I want you to consider a partnership. Let us bring in a team. Real scientists. Independent geologists. Let them assess the site properly. If they say it's too dangerous, we walk away. If they say it can be done safely, you get a percentage of everything we extract. Enough to secure your future. Enough to help rebuild this town. And if I say no, Maxwell's expression didn't change. Then my legal team will be in touch. We'll file for eminent domain review. Argue that the public interest outweighs private ownership. It'll take time. It'll cost you money you don't have. And in the end, a judge will probably rule in our favor anyway. He let that sink in. You can fight this Thea. You probably will. But understand something. His voice dropped. Not a threat. Just a certainty. This doesn't stop just because you say no. It just becomes harder for everyone, including you. Before Thea could respond, one of Maxwell's men approached from the clearing. Sir, we need to head back. The weather's getting worse. Maxwell nodded. He looked at Thea one more time. I meant what I said about Marcus. He was a good man, a brilliant engineer, and he taught me to respect the land. A pause. But he also taught me what happens when protection becomes paralysis. When fear of what might go wrong stops you from doing anything at all. He turned and walked back toward the SUVs. Thea stood alone on the dock, watching them leave. The engines started. The vehicles turned slowly in the mud and disappeared down the trail. The rain fell harder now. She looked down at her hands. They were shaking. That night, Thea sat in the mill surrounded by everything Marcus had left behind. The metal case, the notebooks, the folders, the geological surveys, the seismic models. Years of work spread across the floor like pieces of a puzzle she was supposed to solve. She'd read through it all twice now, understood maybe half. The technical language was dense. Equations she couldn't parse. Diagrams that required expertise she didn't have. But the core message was clear. The crystalline formation was real. The energy potential was massive. And the risk of collapse was significant but not certain. Marcus had calculated probabilities, run models. Some showed stable extraction was possible. Others showed catastrophic failure. The uncertainty was the problem, not knowing for sure. Having to make a choice based on incomplete information and competing values. Thea pulled out her phone. No service. She'd expected that. She walked outside to the clearing and held it up. One bar appeared. Flickered. Held. She opened her browser and searched for Titan Energy Corporation. The website was professional, polished. Photos of smiling workers and pristine facilities. testimonials about community partnerships and environmental responsibility. She clicked through to their leadership page. Maxwell Cross, CEO. 20 years with the company. Promoted from field operations. Degree in geological engineering from University of Washington. She stared at his photo. The same face she'd seen today, but younger in the picture, smiling, confident. She searched for news about Titan. Most of it was standard corporate coverage, quarterly earnings, new projects, expansion plans. But then she found something else. A local news article from 2013, brief, buried in the regional section. Minor earthquake near Cascade Falls. 4.2 magnitude, no major damage. Attributed to natural seismic activity common in the region. No mention of Titan. No mention of drilling. No mention of injuries. Exactly like Marcus had written. Covered up. Disappeared. Thea closed her phone. The battery was almost dead anyway. She looked up at the night sky. Rain had stopped. Stars were visible through breaks in the clouds. She thought about Maxwell's words, about the town, the people, the suffering that came from doing nothing. She thought about Marcus, about his fear, his certainty that some things were too dangerous to touch. And she thought about herself, 18 years old, alone, holding the future of something she didn't fully understand in her hands. The smart choice was to sell. Take the money. Walk away. Let someone else deal with the complexity and the risk. But she kept coming back to that moment in the cavern. Kneeling beside her grandfather's body, reading his final words, finish what I couldn't. The next morning, Thea made her first call. She'd found a contact in one of Marcus's folders, a note scrolled in the margin. C. Winters, good scientist, honest. A phone number, area code 206, Seattle. Thea walked to the edge of the property where she could get signal. Dialed. It rang 4 times. Hello. The voice was female, older, professional but warm. Is this Dr. Catherine Winters? Speaking. Who's calling? My name is Thea Rivers. I think you might have known my grandfather. Marcus Rivers. Silence on the other end, long enough that Thea thought the call had dropped. Then quietly, Marcus had a granddaughter. Yes. I didn't know. He never... Catherine paused. Is he all right? He passed away 12 years ago. Another silence. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Marcus and I lost touch years ago. We had a falling out over a project he was working on. He thought I was being too cautious. I thought he was being reckless. A sad laugh. Turns out we were both right. He left me his property, Thea said, and his research. I need someone to help me understand what he found. What kind of research? Geological, energy-related. It's complicated. Catherine was quiet for a moment. Where are you? Cascade Falls, Washington. The old mill property. You know it. I know of it. Marcus invited me out here once, years ago. Wanted my opinion on some readings he was getting. I told him it was too dangerous to pursue. We argued. He asked me to leave. Catherine's tone shifted. What did he find, Thea? I think you should see it for yourself. They arranged to meet 2 days later. Thea's second call was harder. She'd gotten the name from a waitress in town, an older woman at the diner who'd served her breakfast without asking questions. Thea had mentioned she was staying at the mill. The woman had looked at her differently after that. Marcus's granddaughter. Yes. Well, the woman had softened. There's someone you should talk to. Frank Holloway. He worked at the mill before it closed. Knew your grandfather pretty well. Lives just outside town. She'd written down an address. Thea drove there in a truck she'd borrowed from the diner's owner. Payment for helping clean tables that morning. The house was small, wood-sided, well-maintained despite its age. A vegetable garden in the front yard. Tools organized neatly in an open shed. She knocked. The man who answered was tall, 70s maybe. Weathered face and strong hands. He wore flannel and work boots and carried himself like someone who'd spent his life doing hard physical labor. Help you? Are you Frank Holloway? Depends who's asking. Thea Rivers. Marcus Rivers was my grandfather. Frank's expression changed. The hard suspicion melted into something gentler. I'll be damned. You look like him. Same eyes. He stepped back. Come on in. Inside the house was simple but comfortable. Photos on the walls. A wood stove in the corner. Books stacked on shelves built by hand. Frank poured coffee without asking if she wanted any. They sat at a kitchen table scarred from years of use. I wondered if Marcus had family, Frank said. He never talked about it. But sometimes you could see it in his face, something weighing on him. Did you work with him? For him? At the mill? I was a logger. Worked the floor. Marcus ran the operations. This was back when the place was still running. Before, he trailed off. Before what? Before Titan Energy came sniffing around. Before Marcus started getting paranoid. Before everything fell apart. Frank took a sip of coffee. He was a good man. Fair boss. But near the end, something changed. He got secretive. Started working odd hours. Wouldn't let anyone into certain parts of the mill. He found something, I figured. Never knew what. But I trusted him. When he said we needed to shut down and clear out, I didn't argue. Some of the other guys did. They needed the work. But Marcus paid us severance out of his own pocket. Made sure everyone had enough to get by for a while. What happened to the town after that? Frank's jaw tightened. You've seen Main Street. That's what happened. Mill closed. Jobs disappeared. Families left. The ones who stayed. He looked out the window. We make do. But it's not living. It's surviving. Titan Energy wants to develop the property, Thea said. They say it could bring jobs back, help the town. They've been saying that for years. Every few months, someone from Titan shows up, talks about opportunities, development, progress. Frank's voice was hard, but they never deliver. Just talk, surveys, permits that go nowhere. What if they're serious this time? then people will be tempted. Desperate people make desperate choices. He looked at her, but I knew Marcus, and if he sealed that place up, he had good reason. He wasn't a coward, wasn't lazy. He was protecting something, or protecting people from something. Same difference. Frank set down his coffee. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. Well, when you figure it out, and if you need help, you call me. Marcus did right by me when he didn't have to. I owe him. And I owe you. Thea felt something loosen in her chest. The first hint that maybe she wasn't as alone as she'd thought. The third call came by accident. Thea had been researching environmental law at the library in town, trying to understand what rights she had, what Titan could actually do. The librarian, an elderly woman with thick glasses, had noticed what she was reading. You looking for a lawyer? Maybe. Victoria Hayes practices environmental law out of Seattle. Does pro bono work sometimes for conservation cases. She's good. Doesn't back down from corporations. The librarian had written down a number. Thea called that afternoon. Victoria answered on the second ring. Her voice was sharp, efficient. Hayes Law. What can I do for you? Thea explained the situation, the inheritance, the land, Titan's interest, the geological concerns. Victoria listened without interrupting. And you want to protect the property from development. I want to understand my options. Your options are limited if you're going up against Titan Energy. They have money, lawyers, political connections. You have what the deed and some geological surveys from 12 years ago. Is that enough? Depends on what the surveys say. If there's legitimate environmental or safety concerns, we might be able to trigger federal review. Slow things down. Maybe stop them entirely. A pause. But I'm going to be honest with you, Thea. These fights are expensive, time-consuming, and they don't always end the way you want. I don't have money. I know. The librarian already called me. Told me your situation. That's why I'm talking to you. Victoria's tone softened slightly. I take on 1 or 2 cases a year pro bono, usually environmental justice work. This might qualify, but I need to see the documentation first. Need to know we have a legitimate case. When can you come out? I'll be there Friday. 2 days later, Dr. Catherine Winters arrived at the mill. She was exactly what Thea had pictured. Early 60s, gray hair pulled back, practical clothes, wire-rimmed glasses. She carried 2 cases of equipment and moved with the careful precision of someone who'd spent decades in fieldwork. You must be Thea. They shook hands. Thank you for coming. I almost didn't. Catherine looked around at the mill. Too many memories here. Not all of them good. But Marcus. She trailed off. He deserved better than he got. From Titan. From me. If I can help his granddaughter, maybe that's something. I need you to see what he found. And tell me if he was right. Catherine's expression grew serious. Right about what? That it's too dangerous to touch. They went down together. Catherine had insisted on bringing her own equipment. Seismic sensors, ground-penetrating radar, spectrographic analyzers. She set them up methodically, taking readings from multiple points in the cavern. Thea watched her work. The older woman moved with practiced efficiency, making notes, adjusting instruments, occasionally muttering to herself. After 2 hours, Catherine sat down on a flat boulder and pulled off her glasses, rubbed her eyes. "Well, your grandfather was right." Catherine's voice was quiet. "And he was wrong. I don't understand. The formation is real. The energy potential is massive. Possibly revolutionary if someone figured out how to harness it safely." She gestured at the crystals around them. "But the instability is also real. The fault lines underneath. The pressure. The risk of cascade failure. So extraction is impossible." "I didn't say that." Catherine put her glasses back on. "I said Marcus was right and wrong. Right that reckless extraction would be catastrophic. Wrong that careful, measured extraction is impossible." "How can you be sure?" "I can't. Not completely. That's the problem with geology. We model. We calculate. We make educated guesses. But the Earth doesn't always behave the way we expect." She stood and walked to one of the massive crystal columns, touched it gently. "This is extraordinary, Thea. I've never seen anything like it. The scientific community would kill to study this. Titan wants to drill. Of course they do. And if they're smart, if they bring in the right people and move slowly, they might be able to do it safely. Might being the operative word." "What would you do if this was your land?" Catherine looked at her for a long moment. "Honestly, I don't know. Because this isn't just about science. It's about values. What you think matters more. Potential benefit versus potential risk. Economic development versus environmental protection. The needs of a community versus the safety of a region." She walked back to Thea. "Marcus made his choice. He chose protection over development. Zero risk over potential benefit. And he paid for that choice with his life and his relationships. Now you have to make yours. What if I choose wrong? Then you'll have to live with it, just like the rest of us." Catherine's expression softened. "But at least you'll have made a choice based on the best information available. That's all any of us can do." They climbed back to the surface as the sun was setting. Victoria Hayes arrived the next day. She spent 3 hours reviewing Marcus's documentation, reading every page, studying every diagram, making notes in a legal pad that filled quickly with her small, precise handwriting. Finally, she looked up. "This is solid. Really solid. If even half of what Marcus documented about the 2013 incident is accurate. We have grounds for a federal environmental review, maybe criminal investigation into the cover-up. Can it stop them? It can slow them down, significantly. Federal reviews take time, especially when there's documented evidence of previous safety violations. And the earthquake history." Victoria tapped her pen against the pad. "That's the leverage. Titan can't ignore a documented seismic event, even if they covered it up. So what do? We file, formally, with the Department of Interior. Request immediate halt to all permits pending environmental impact study. We cite Marcus's research, the 2013 incident, the geological instability. We make it impossible for them to move forward without addressing these concerns. And then we fight, in court, in the media if necessary. We make this public. Force transparency. Make Titan prove their extraction plan is safe before they touch a single rock. Victoria stood and walked to the window, looked out at the forest. I'm not gonna lie to you, Thea. This won't be easy. Titan will push back hard. They'll attack the credibility of Marcus's research. They'll hire their own experts to contradict everything. They'll drag this out for months, maybe years. I don't have months. I know. But you have something they don't. Victoria turned back to her. You have the truth. And you have Marcus's legacy. That counts for something. Over the next week, everything accelerated. Victoria filed the formal environmental challenge. The news hit the local paper first. Then regional outlets picked it up. 18-year-old Orphan fights energy giant to protect grandfather's discovery. It wasn't the story Thea would have chosen, but it was the one that got attention. Titan responded within 48 hours. A press release, carefully worded, expressing respect for environmental concerns, highlighting their commitment to safety and transparency, promising independent review of all geological data, but also making clear they wouldn't be deterred. The development represented jobs, growth, hope for struggling communities. They owed it to the region to pursue this responsibly. Maxwell Cross did an interview with the Seattle Times. Professional, measured. He spoke about Marcus with genuine respect. Called him a brilliant engineer and a valued colleague. But he also questioned whether 12-year-old data was sufficient to make decisions about modern extraction techniques. Technology had advanced. Safety protocols had improved. The risks Marcus feared might no longer be relevant. It was a masterful piece of media management. And it worked. The town split. Some residents rallied behind Thea. Environmentalists, younger families who'd seen what resource extraction could do to a place. They held a meeting at the community center. 50 people showed up. They talked about preservation, safety, the value of protecting something rare. But others went the opposite direction. A counter-meeting formed. Older residents, unemployed loggers, business owners struggling to stay open. They talked about jobs, survival, the cruelty of having a solution to their problems sitting untouched because some kid from outside the community decided to play environmental crusader. Mayor Robert Hutchinson sided with them publicly, gave a speech about economic reality, about the responsibility to put people before rocks, about the difference between idealism and practical governance. Thea watched it all unfold from the mill. Frank Holloway came by most evenings, brought food, updates from town, support. Don't let them get to you, he said one night. People are scared. When you're scared, you lash out at whoever's closest. Right now, that's you. They're not wrong, though, Thea said. They do need help, and I'm standing in the way. You're standing between them and potential disaster. That's different. Is it if nothing happens? If Titan extracts safely and the town gets jobs, and everything works out fine, then what I'll have been the obstacle? The person who made their suffering last longer. Frank was quiet for a moment. Marcus struggled with that same question. I could see it eating at him. The responsibility, the uncertainty. He looked at her. You know what I think he finally decided? What? That some things are worth protecting even when you can't be certain. That caution isn't cowardice. And that if you wait until you're absolutely sure before you act, you'll never act at all. 2 weeks after the filing, Catherine came back. She'd brought 2 colleagues, seismologists from the university. They spent a full day in the cavern, running tests, taking samples, building models. Their conclusion was the same as Catherine's: significant risk, but not certain catastrophe. They recommended extensive additional study before any extraction attempt. Slow, careful monitoring. Phased approach if development moved forward. But they couldn't say it was absolutely impossible. That uncertainty gnawed at Thea, because she realized Maxwell had been right about one thing. Doing nothing was a choice, and it had consequences. The town continued to struggle. Businesses continued to close. Families continued to leave. And she sat on top of something that might help them, paralyzed by the fear of what might go wrong. On the 30th day after she'd arrived at the mill, Thea made her decision. She called Victoria. File everything. Push for the federal review. Make them prove it's safe. You're sure? Thea looked around the mill. At Marcus's notes spread across the floor. At the hatch that led down to the cavern. At the legacy her grandfather had left her. No, but I'm doing it anyway. That's the spirit. Victoria's voice carried something that might have been pride. I'll have the paperwork filed by morning. That night, Thea went down to the cavern one last time. She stood in the center of that impossible forest of stone. Crystal columns rising around her like silent witnesses. The faint vibration of the earth beneath her feet. The whisper of geothermal energy moving in patterns she couldn't see. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, she said to the darkness, to Marcus, to herself. But I'm going to try to finish what you started. Protect this place. Or at least make sure if it's used right. The crystals caught her flashlight beam and threw it back in fractured constellations. Somewhere deep below, that rhythmic pulse continued. Tick, tick, crack. The earth patient and restless, waiting to see what would happen next. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Seattle Times front page above the fold. A photograph of the mill silhouetted against dark clouds. Headline in bold type. Energy Giant's Deadly Secret. The cover-up that could cost lives. James Brennan had done his job well. The article was thorough, methodical. It laid out everything. Marcus Rivers' discovery. The 2013 illegal drilling. The earthquake. The injuries. The worker who'd never been found. The systematic cover-up that followed. And at the center of it all, an 18-year-old girl standing alone against a corporation that wanted what was buried beneath her land. Thea read it on her phone in the early morning light. Each paragraph felt surreal, like reading about someone else's life. But it was hers, and there was no taking it back now. By noon, the story had spread. Regional news outlets picked it up. Environmental groups began circulating it on social media. Within hours, a hashtag appeared. Save Rivers Land. Simple, direct, effective. Victoria called at 2 in the afternoon. Have you seen the response? Some of it. It's bigger than I expected. The environmental angle is resonating. Young woman versus corporate giant. Protecting her grandfather's legacy. It's the kind of story people connect with. A pause. But Thea, you need to be ready. Titan's going to respond. And they won't be gentle. Victoria was right. Titan's response came within 6 hours. A formal statement released through their public relations department. Carefully crafted, professional. It expressed deep respect for environmental concerns and commitment to safety above all else. It praised Marcus Rivers as a brilliant engineer whose early work had been foundational to their understanding of the region. But it also questioned whether 12-year-old data should determine current policy. Technology had advanced. Safety protocols had evolved. Modern extraction techniques bore little resemblance to the crude methods that might have caused problems a decade ago. The statement concluded with a promise. Titan would welcome independent scientific review, would cooperate fully with any federal investigation, would prove through transparency and rigorous analysis that responsible development was possible. It was masterful spin. By evening, Maxwell Cross was on television. Local news. Prime time. Sitting across from an interviewer in a tasteful studio, wearing a suit that suggested authority without arrogance. He spoke about community, about responsibility, about the difference between protecting the environment and abandoning people who desperately needed help. Marcus Rivers was my mentor, Maxwell said, his voice heavy with what seemed like genuine emotion. He taught me everything I know about this work, and I respected his caution, his careful approach to resource development. The interviewer leaned forward. But you disagree with his conclusions about this site. I disagree with the premise that we must choose between safety and progress, between environmental protection and economic development. That's a false choice. With proper planning, rigorous oversight, and modern technology, we can achieve both. What about the allegations of a cover-up, the 2013 incident? Maxwell's expression grew somber. I wasn't CEO at that time, but I've ordered a complete internal review of our records from that period. If there was misconduct, if proper protocols weren't followed, we'll address it fully and transparently. That's my commitment. He looked directly into the camera. But I also want to speak directly to the people of Cascade Falls, to the families struggling to make ends meet, to the young people who see no future here. I want you to know that Titan Energy hasn't forgotten you. We haven't abandoned this region, and if we can find a way forward that's safe and responsible, we will bring jobs back, real jobs. Lasting opportunity. It was a calculated performance, and it worked. The next morning, counter-protests began. About 30 people gathered outside the mill. Most were older, working class. They carried signs with messages written in marker on cardboard. Jobs, not rocks. We need work, not environmental theater. Let us decide our future. Thea watched from the window, recognized some faces from town. The man who ran the closed hardware store, the woman from the gas station. People who'd been polite when she'd passed them on the street, but never warm. Now they stood outside her property, angry and desperate, and she understood why. Frank arrived an hour later, parked his truck between the protesters and the mill. "Don't go out there, Da," he said when he came inside. "They're not violent, but they're hurting. And hurt people say things they don't mean." "They're right, though," Thea said quietly. "They do need jobs, and I'm the one standing in the way. You're standing between them and potential disaster. That's not the same thing, isn't it? If nothing happens, if Titan extracts safely and everyone gets work and the town comes back to life, what am I, just the obstacle who made their suffering last longer?" Frank didn't have an answer for that. The protests continued for 3 days. Never violent, but constant. A reminder that every choice had costs. That protection meant denying people something they desperately wanted. On the 4th day, things escalated. Someone leaked Thea's foster care records. Not officially, not through any legal channel, just suddenly available online. Posted to social media, shared across forums and comment sections. Every placement she'd been through, every incident report, every note from social workers documenting behavior problems, trust issues, difficulty bonding with families. The narrative wrote itself. Troubled girl, no family, no roots, no real connection to this community or this land. Playing at environmental activism with property she'd inherited by accident. The comments were brutal. She doesn't care about Cascade Falls. She's just enjoying the attention. Typical entitled kid. Doesn't understand what real people need. Marcus Rivers was crazy at the end. Now his equally unstable granddaughter is making decisions that affect thousands of lives. Thea read them in the mill's dim light, each one landing like a physical blow. Victoria was furious when she found out. This is character assassination. Probably illegal. Definitely unethical. We can sue for invasion of privacy. "It doesn't matter," Thea said. Her voice sounded distant even to herself. "It's already out there. Everyone's already seen it. It matters because it's not who you are. A few incidents when you were a kid don't define you." "Don't they?" Thea looked at the screen, at the documentation of every time she'd failed to fit, to belong, to be what people needed. Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't have any business making these decisions. "Stop." Victoria's voice was sharp. "That's exactly what they want. They want you to doubt yourself, to give up, to hand them what they want because you're too tired or too hurt to keep fighting. I am tired. I know. But tired isn't the same as wrong." That night, Catherine returned with 2 colleagues, Dr. James Morrison, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, both seismologists, both respected in their fields. They'd agreed to conduct a comprehensive analysis of the site. Independent, rigorous, the kind of study that would hold up under federal review. But they needed access to the cavern. Complete access. Time to install monitoring equipment. Take core samples. Build detailed models. "How long?" Thea asked. "Minimum 2 weeks," Catherine said. "Longer if we want to be thorough. Titan won't wait that long. They don't have a choice if we're fast." Catherine pulled out a tablet, showed Thea a permit application. I filed this yesterday. Federal Emergency Geological Survey, citing potential seismic risk to populated areas. It grants us temporary exclusive access to the site while we conduct our study. Titan will fight it. Of course they will. But it'll take them a few days to get a hearing. By then, we'll have preliminary data. Something concrete to present to the review board. Thea looked at the three scientists, all of them older, more experienced, willing to put their reputations on the line for this. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't know me. You don't owe Marcus anything." Catherine exchanged glances with her colleagues. "Because this is important," she said finally. "Not just the geological implications, but the principle. We don't rush into extraction because a corporation wants profits. We move carefully, scientifically, with full understanding of the risks." She paused. "And because Marcus was right about one thing. Some things are worth protecting until we understand them fully." They began work the next morning. Thea helped them carry equipment down the stone stairs. Generators, sensors, computers, everything needed for a comprehensive geological survey. The scientists worked with focused intensity, barely speaking except to call out measurements or discuss findings. They mapped every crystal formation, every fault line, every thermal vent. Thea stayed out of their way, watched them work. Try not to think about the protesters above, the comments online, the weight of expectation pressing down from all sides. On the third day of their survey, James Morrison made a discovery. He was examining the far wall of the cavern, the section where Marcus's body had been found, taking measurements with ground-penetrating radar. "Catherine, come look at this." The others gathered around his equipment. "There's a void behind this section of wall. Large, maybe 10 feet deep." "Natural cavity?" Elena asked. "I don't think so. The edges are too regular. Almost like..." James ran his hand along the stone. "Like someone carved it out and then sealed it." Thea felt her pulse quicken. Marcus. They spent the next hour examining the wall more closely, finally found what they were looking for. A section of rock that looked like natural stone but rang hollow when tapped. False wall. Carefully constructed to blend seamlessly with the surrounding formation. It took 2 hours to carefully remove it. Behind the false wall was a chamber. Small. Maybe 8 feet square. And inside, sealed in waterproof containers, was everything. A second complete set of documentation. Every survey, every calculation, every model Marcus had created, organized, labeled, ready to be found. But more than that, video recordings, dozens of them, stored on hard drives packed in desiccant to prevent moisture damage, and a legal brief, already written, already prepared. A comprehensive federal environmental protection claim with every supporting document referenced and indexed. Catherine opened one of the video files on her laptop. Marcus Rivers appeared on screen. Older than the photos Thea had seen, thinner, exhausted, but clear-eyed and determined. The video was dated 6 months before his death. "If you're watching this," Marcus began, his voice steady despite everything, "then you found what I left for you Either you're Thea, my granddaughter, or you're someone she trusted enough to bring down here. Either way, I need you to listen carefully." He leaned closer to the camera. "I know what Titan will do. They'll question my data. Call me paranoid. Suggest that modern technology makes the risks obsolete. They'll be persuasive, professional. They'll offer jobs and money and hope to a community that desperately needs all three." A pause. "And they might even be right. Maybe technology has advanced enough. Maybe careful extraction is possible now. I can't know for certain because I won't live to see it." Marcus rubbed his face with both hands. "But here's what I do know. In 2013, they drilled recklessly, caused an earthquake, hurt people, and then they covered it up. Not because they're evil, but because admitting the mistake would cost them. Financially, legally, politically." He looked directly into the camera. "So I don't trust them to do it right this time. Not without oversight. Not without accountability. Not without someone forcing them to prove beyond any doubt that they can do this safely." The video showed him standing, walking out of frame. When he returned, he was holding papers. "I've prepared everything you need. Complete documentation, legal strategy, even contacts for scientists who can verify my findings independently. It's all here. Everything required to trigger federal environmental review, to force Titan to prove their case instead of just asserting it." He set the papers down. "To Thea, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. For everything. For not being there. For leaving you this burden. You deserve better than an absent grandfather. And an impossible choice." His voice cracked slightly. "But I also believe you're stronger than you know. Stronger than I was. And if you choose to fight this, you won't be fighting alone. I've laid the groundwork, left you the weapons. All you have to do is use them." Marcus moved closer to the camera again. "But understand something. This fight will cost you time, energy, peace of mind. People will question your motives, attack your character, make you doubt yourself. That's how these battles work. They grind you down until giving up seems easier than continuing." A long pause. "So here's my advice from someone who fought and lost. Remember why you're fighting. Not because you're certain you're right, but because uncertainty demands caution. Because the stakes are too high to gamble on corporate promises. Because some things once destroyed can never be recovered." He reached toward the camera. "Good luck, Thea. I wish I could be there to help you. But this is all I can offer. My research, my experience, my hope that you'll finish what I started." The video ended. Thea sat in silence, tears streaming down her face. The scientists gave her space, turned away, pretended to be absorbed in their equipment. Finally, Catherine knelt beside her. "He prepared everything," she said softly. "A complete roadmap for how to fight this, with evidence that's even stronger than what we had before." Thea wiped her eyes. Why didn't he just go public himself? Why wait? Why leave it for me? Maybe he was tired of fighting alone. Maybe he thought a fresh voice, a new generation would be more effective. Catherine paused. Or maybe he wanted to give you something, a purpose, a mission, a way to know him, even though he couldn't be there in person. That's a hell of a gift. Yes, it is. They copied everything, every file, every video, every document, made multiple backups, sent encrypted copies to Victoria. But they weren't careful enough. On their 6th day underground, as they were packing up the last of their equipment, they heard voices from above, footsteps on the stone stairs. Thea's stomach dropped. 6 men descended into the cavern. Not security guards, corporate representatives, led by someone from Titan's legal department. "You're trespassing," the man said. Professional. Clipped. "This site is under active permit review. You don't have authority to be here." "We have a federal emergency survey permit," Catherine replied, equally professional. "Properly filed and approved, which gives us full access. That permit was issued based on fraudulent claims of imminent seismic risk. Titan has filed an injunction. The permit's been suspended pending review. You can't do that." "We just did." The man gestured to the equipment. "You'll need to cease all activity immediately and vacate the property." "Or what?" Thea stepped forward. "This is my land. I gave them permission to be here." The man turned to her. His expression was sympathetic but firm. "Ms. Rivers, I understand this is difficult, but there are legal processes for this kind of work. Proper protocols. Your scientists have violated those protocols. If they continue, Titan will file a formal complaint with federal authorities. Academic misconduct, interference with corporate property rights. It could end their careers." Catherine's jaw tightened. "You're bluffing." We have documentation of every regulation your team has skirted, every shortcut taken, every procedural requirement ignored in your rush to gather data before we could intervene." The man pulled out a tablet, showed them a formal legal filing. "We're not trying to stop legitimate science. We're stopping what amounts to corporate espionage disguised as research." Elena spoke up. "Everything we've done is standard geological survey work on a site where you don't hold the extraction rights, using equipment purchased with funding from organizations actively opposed to resource development. Your bias is documented. Your methodology is questionable. And your presence here is now legally prohibited." The men moved to the equipment, started documenting everything with cameras, taking photos of serial numbers, recording the scientists' names. "This is intimidation," James said. "This is compliance enforcement." The man looked at Catherine. "Dr. Winters, you have a distinguished career. 20 years at the university. Published research. Respected reputation. Is this really the hill you want to die on?" Catherine didn't flinch. "Yes, it is." "Then you'll do so knowing the consequences." He turned to the others. "All of you, pack your equipment. You have 1 hour to vacate the property. If you're still here after that, we'll have local law enforcement remove you." They had no choice. Slowly, reluctantly, the scientists began gathering their equipment, disconnecting sensors, packing computers, carrying everything back up those narrow stone stairs. Thea helped them load everything into Catherine's van. "I'm sorry," she said. I didn't think they'd move this fast. They've been planning this, Catherine replied, waiting for us to make a move so they could counter it. We played right into their hands. What happens now? Now we fight in court. Present what data we managed to collect. Hope it's enough. Catherine looked back at the mill. But Thea, you need to be ready. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Victoria called an hour after the scientists left. I heard what happened. Titans filing motion after motion, trying to bury us in paperwork, delay the federal review, paint us as obstructionist and unscientific. What do? We accelerate. File everything we have now. Force the hearing before they can build more momentum. Victoria's voice was grim. But I'm not going to lie. This is going to be close. Really close. The federal hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Those weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Victoria worked 18-hour days. Catherine and her team compiled their preliminary findings into a formal report. Frank helped Thea organize Marcus's documentation into presentable formats. But Titan wasn't idle. They brought in their own experts, geologists with impressive credentials who reviewed the data and concluded that modern extraction techniques could safely harness the energy beneath the site. They published their findings, held press conferences, made their case to anyone who would listen. They also brought in the community, organized town halls where residents could voice their support for development, where unemployed workers could testify about their struggles, where business owners could plead for anything that might bring customers back. Mayor Hutchinson became Titan's most vocal advocate, appeared on news programs, wrote op-eds, framed the issue as a choice between elite environmental concerns and working-class survival. The narrative shifted, slowly but steadily. What had started as a story about corporate malfeasance became a debate about priorities. Progress versus preservation. Jobs versus rocks. Real people versus abstract principles. Thea felt the ground shifting beneath her. The hearing was held in Seattle. Federal building. Conference room designed for exactly this kind of proceeding. Long tables, microphones, a panel of 3 reviewers from the Department of Interior. Thea sat between Victoria and Catherine. Across the room, Maxwell Cross sat with his legal team. 6 lawyers, all expensive suits and confident expressions. The proceeding began at 9 in the morning. Titan presented first. They were professional, polished. They acknowledged Marcus Rivers' concerns, praised his careful approach, but argued that his data was outdated, that modern seismic monitoring and precision drilling made the risks he feared largely obsolete. Their experts testified, showed models, demonstrated how phased extraction could be done safely, with constant monitoring, with fail-safes at every stage. Then they brought in the community. Mayor Hutchinson testified about Cascade Falls' decline, about families leaving, children growing up without hope, about the moral imperative to use available resources to help struggling people. A former mill worker testified about unemployment, about watching his town die, about the desperation of wanting to work but having nothing to do. It was effective, emotionally powerful, hard to argue against. Then it was their turn. Catherine presented the geological data, explained the fault lines, the crystalline matrix, the cascade risk if drilling went wrong. She was clear, professional, but also honest about the uncertainties. Can we say with absolute certainty that extraction will cause catastrophic failure? Science rarely deals in absolutes, but the risk is significant, measurable, and the consequences of being wrong are severe. Victoria presented Marcus's documentation, the 2013 incident, the cover-up, the pattern of Titan prioritizing profit over safety. This isn't about being anti-development, she argued. It's about demanding accountability, transparency, proof that lessons have been learned and proper protocols will be followed. Then Thea testified. She'd prepared remarks. Victoria had helped her write them. But when she sat at the microphone looking at the panel of reviewers, the prepared speech felt wrong. Instead, she pulled out Marcus's journal. The original, worn and water-stained. My grandfather wrote this over 12 years, she began. Her voice was quieter than she'd intended, but steady. Every entry, every calculation, every warning. He wasn't trying to stop progress. He was trying to prevent disaster. She opened to the final entry, read it aloud. The words filled the room. Marcus's fear, his regret, his final plea to protect what he'd found, or at least ensure it was approached with proper caution. When she finished, the room was quiet. I'm 18 years old, Thea continued. I don't have a degree in geology or engineering. I can't match Titan's experts model for model. But I can read. And I can understand that my grandfather died believing this place needed protection. She looked at Maxwell. Mr. Cross says he respected Marcus, that Marcus taught him to read the land, to be careful, to think long-term. But he's not being careful now. He's being aggressive, pushing for extraction before the science is settled, before we know for certain it's safe. She turned back to the panel. Maybe he's right. Maybe modern technology makes this safe. But maybe it doesn't. And the cost of being wrong isn't just property damage or financial loss. It's an earthquake. It's injuries. It's lives disrupted or destroyed across a 50-mile radius. Thea set the journal on the table. I'm not asking you to preserve this site forever. I'm asking you to make Titan prove it's safe first. Really prove it. With independent oversight. With time to study and model and understand. With accountability if they're wrong. She sat down. The panel deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, the lead reviewer spoke. This is a complex case. Both sides present valid concerns. The potential benefits of development are significant, but so are the potential risks. He paused. After careful consideration, we're issuing a temporary protective designation for the site. All extraction activities are suspended pending completion of a comprehensive environmental impact study. That study will be conducted by an independent team selected jointly by the Department of Interior and the U.S. Geological Survey. Timeline minimum 18 months. Relief flooded through Thea, but the reviewer wasn't finished. However, we're also directing both parties to participate in good faith discussions about eventual development. This designation is temporary, not permanent. The goal is to determine if safe extraction is possible, not to prevent it categorically. He looked at Thea. Ms. Rivers, you've won time. Use it wisely. Work with the scientists, with the community. Find a path forward that protects both safety and opportunity. Because this decision can be revisited if circumstances change. Then he looked at Maxwell. Mr. Cross, Titan Energy will cooperate fully with the independent study. You'll provide all requested data. Answer all questions. And if evidence of the 2013 cover-up is substantiated, there will be consequences. The gavel came down. Outside the building, reporters waited. Thea made a brief statement, thanked the panel, thanked her team, expressed hope that the study would provide clarity. Maxwell gave his own statement, expressed respect for the process, commitment to cooperation, confidence that science would ultimately support safe development. They were professional, measured, careful. But as Thea turned to leave, Maxwell called out, Ms. Rivers. A moment. She stopped. He approached. Alone this time. His legal team had already left. That was well done, he said quietly. The testimony, reading Marcus's journal, very effective. It wasn't a performance. I meant every word. I know. That's why it worked. He was quiet for a moment. I really did study under Marcus. Everything I said about him was true. He taught me to read the land, to respect it, to think long term. But not carefully enough. Perhaps. Maxwell looked up at the federal building. I want you to know something. The 2013 incident. I really didn't know the full extent. They kept it from me. Classified it as executive level only. When your attorney started digging, I ordered my own internal investigation. He pulled out a folder, handed it to Thea. Inside were internal Titan memos, executive communications about the 2013 drilling, about the earthquake, about the decision to cover it up, about paying off families, destroying evidence. This is everything we found, Maxwell said. I'm submitting it to the federal investigation. Anonymous leak to appear on the surface, but I wanted you to know it came from me. Thea stared at the documents. Why? Because Marcus deserved better. Because those workers deserve better. And because if we're going to move forward with this, it has to be done right. Transparently. With full acknowledgement of past mistakes. He met her eyes. I still believe this can be developed safely. I still think the community deserves the opportunity. But I also believe you're right to demand proof, to force accountability, to make us work for it. What changed? Maxwell was quiet for a long moment. Watching you testify, seeing you hold up that journal, it reminded me why I got into this work in the first place. Not for profit, not for corporate success, but because I believed we could harness natural resources responsibly, in a way that helped people without destroying what made those resources valuable. He gestured at the folder. I forgot that somewhere along the way. Let the pressure to perform, to deliver results, to show quarterly growth override the principles Marcus taught me. Your fight reminded me what I'd lost. Thea didn't know what to say. We'll probably end up on opposite sides again, Maxwell continued. If the study shows extraction is safe, I'll push forward. That's my job. But I'll do it the right way this time. With transparency. With proper oversight. With respect for the risks. He extended his hand. After a moment, Thea shook it. I can live with that, she said. 6 months later. The mill looked different. Better. Not restored to what it had been, but transformed into what it was becoming. The exterior had been repaired. New roof, windows replaced, structural reinforcement. The dock had been rebuilt. Stronger. Safer. Inside, the old mill floor had been converted into a research station, computer equipment, geological monitoring stations, a small lab for analyzing samples, living quarters for visiting scientists, a meeting room with a long table where teams could collaborate. The hatch remained, but now it was properly secured, with a locked cover, official signage, controlled access. The cavern below had become one of the most studied geological sites in North America. Teams rotated through. Seismologists, crystallographers, geothermal specialists, all working under strict protocols, taking measurements, building models, slowly, carefully understanding what Marcus had found. Thea lived in a small apartment attached to the station, managed the schedule, coordinated with researchers, learned from them. She'd started taking online classes, geology, environmental science, the things she needed to understand to do this work properly. Frank Holloway had become the station's unofficial advisor. He came by most days, helped with maintenance, offered perspective, shared stories about Marcus, about the mill as it used to be. Catherine visited monthly, brought new students, turned the site into a teaching opportunity, a place where the next generation of scientists could learn about responsible resource management. On a cool autumn morning, Thea stood on the rebuilt dock and watched the river flow past. It still moved slowly, still carried debris, but it seemed less defeated now, like it had found a purpose beyond just existing. Frank joined her. Thinking, he asked. Always. They stood in comfortable silence. You know, Frank said eventually, Marcus would be proud of what you've done here. Not just winning the fight, but what you built after. I didn't build it alone. No, but you started it. Chose to protect it rather than profit from it. That takes courage. He paused, especially when people are angry at you for that choice. The town was still struggling, still divided. Some residents had come around, appreciated the research station, the scientists who stayed at the local motel, the small economic boost it provided. But others remained resentful, still wanted the jobs Titan had promised, still saw Thea as the obstacle between them and prosperity. Do you think I made the right choice? Thea asked. Frank considered the question carefully. I think you made the honest choice, the careful choice. Whether it's right, we won't know for years, maybe decades. When the study is complete, when we know for certain whether safe extraction is possible. And if it is, if they prove it can be done safely, then you didn't stop progress. You just made sure it happened responsibly, with full knowledge of the risks and proper preparation for them. He looked at her. That's not defeat. That's wisdom. A car pulled up to the station. Dr. Catherine Winters stepped out, followed by two younger researchers. "Morning, Thea." "Frank." Catherine waved. "We've got the new seismic data from last month. Thought you'd want to see it." They walked inside together. The meeting room had photos on the walls now. Marcus at various stages of his career, standing by drilling rigs, reviewing surveys, teaching young engineers. And one photo Thea had found in the metal case, Marcus holding a small girl, both of them smiling at the camera. A day at the zoo, her 6th birthday, the day he'd promised to come, but never did. She'd hung it where she'd see it every day, a reminder of what he'd sacrificed, what he'd chosen, what he'd left her. Catherine spread the data across the table. The fault line activity is stable. No increased stress indicators. The crystalline matrix shows no degradation. If anything, our monitoring suggests the formation is more robust than Marcus initially calculated. "Meaning what?" Thea asked. "Meaning that with proper techniques, carefully phased extraction might be possible. Not certain, but possible." Catherine looked up. "Titan will see this data in the official report next month. They'll likely restart their development proposals. And we'll make them prove every step," Thea said. Exactly. The afternoon passed in discussion, review of protocols, planning for the next phase of study, the work that would determine the ultimate fate of what lay beneath. As the sun set, Thea walked down to the cavern alone. She descended the stone stairs, stood in that impossible forest of crystal, watched the light from her flashlight fracture into constellations across the stone. The earth still hummed beneath her feet. That same rhythmic pulse. Tick, tick, crack. Patient. Waiting. "I don't know if I'm doing this right," she said aloud. To Marcus, to herself, to the stones that had witnessed everything. "The study might prove you were wrong. That extraction is safe. That all your caution was unnecessary." She touched one of the massive crystal columns. "But even if that's true, I think you were right about something else. That some things deserve protection until we understand them fully. That rushing into extraction just because we can is different from doing it because we should." The crystals caught her light and threw it back. "So I'll keep protecting this place. Keep demanding proof. Keep making them work for it. And if they eventually prove it safe, if development happens responsibly with full knowledge and proper care." She paused. "Then that's not failure. That's what you wanted all along. Understanding before exploitation." She stood there a while longer, in the silence and the light and the ancient patience of stone. Then she climbed back up, back to the station, back to the work, because that was the thing about legacy. It wasn't about winning or losing, success or failure, preservation or development. It was about having the courage to protect what mattered while staying open to what was possible, about doing the hard work of understanding before acting, about choosing carefully even when others demanded speed, and about passing that wisdom forward to the next person, the next generation, the next fight. Some things aren't meant to be owned, Marcus had written. Some things are meant to be understood. Thea Rivers understood that now, and she would spend as long as it took making sure everyone else did too. Not because she was certain she was right, but because uncertainty demanded nothing less than her absolute commitment to getting it right. That was the inheritance that mattered, not the land, not the crystals, not even the potential wealth buried beneath, but the responsibility to protect what was rare and fragile and irreplaceable until the world was wise enough to approach it with proper reverence. That night, Thea sat at her desk and opened a new journal. The first page blank and waiting. She picked up a pen and wrote, Day 1, Research Station Operations. The work continues. And then, smaller at the bottom of the page, Thank you, Marcus, for trusting me with this. I'll make it count. Outside, the forest stood dark and patient. The river moved slow and steady, and deep beneath the crystals hummed their ancient song, waiting for whatever came next.